Hi there, this is Justin Krane, Certified Financial Planner Professional and founder of Krane Financial Solutions. Welcome to Money You Got This. So how can you really live? How? By uniting your business money, your personal money with your life and your business. Word up.
Krane Financial is an SEC-registered investment advisor. However, such registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training, and no inference to the contrary should be made. A copy of our current written disclosure statement discussing our advisory services and fees is available upon request. Information contained herein is for informational and illustrative purposes only, and general in nature. It should not be considered specific financial planning or investment advice, or a recommendation to buy or sell any type of securities or other investment products.
Hey everybody, welcome to Money You Got This. This show is brought to you by Krane Financial Solutions. I'm Justin Krane. I'm a certified financial planner professional, and I offer investment management services and act as a fractional CFO to business owners. I'm also the author of the book, Money You Got This. I'm psyched you're listening to the show. I want to give you this free report, 3 things multimillionaires do to grow their wealth. Just go to coolmoneyshow.com to grab it. That's coolmoneyshow.com to grab it. Thanks. Speaking of Money You Got This, I've got someone on today, Eric Satz, founder and the CEO of Alto IRA, or as I would call it, Altoira. As I read it.
We're going to go with Alto IRA.
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt right now.
Yeah. Before I introduce you, Eric, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you here.
Justin, thank you for having me.
Awesome. So Eric is a serial entrepreneur. He's had wins and losses. We're going to talk a lot about that. He knows a lot about investing, not just for the wealthy, but for people that are like living out their mission. And he's created a platform for people to invest in what we'll call 21st century investment opportunities to everyone, even non-accredited investors. That means $1 million in assets or less, or a $5 million net worth or less, right?
So it's accredited investor for most people, especially the mass affluent, should think about how much income they've made the last 2 years and how much income they expect to make this year. Mm-hmm. So it's $200,000 as an individual or $300,000 combined with your spouse or partner. And then there's the $1 million liquid asset net worth test, not including your home.
Got it. So you're a former investment banker. You've done early stage investing, and you've raised capital and all of that. Now you're creating a platform for the little guy, which I think is great. So talk to us a little bit about what Alto IRA does and how it works.
Absolutely. So I think what's important is maybe to take a step back and talk about how I got here, because it wasn't necessarily an obvious path. I was running the venture capital funds, and the fund was making a follow-on investment in a portfolio company. And I wanted to invest personally, and it just so happened that I happened to be looking at my IRA statement at that moment, and the light bulb went off, which is the following. I can't touch retirement savings until I, by definition, retire, unless I want to pay taxes today and a penalty, which I don't want to do. Mm-hmm. And alternative assets, private equity, real estate, venture capital, as examples, are long-term investments. And so from a duration matching standpoint, from an asset matching standpoint, retirement dollars are exactly the dollars that we should be using for these long-term investment opportunities. And long-term investment opportunities, because they tend to be illiquid, ought to return at a greater level than liquid assets.
Sure.
And so once the light bulb went off, I called my financial advisor. Unfortunately, it wasn't you. And I said, hey, I'm going to make an investment in one of my portfolio companies. He said, great. And I said, well, I'm going to use my IRA this time. And so we just, send the check from my IRA account to the company. Here are the details. And he said, no. And I said, what do you mean no? And he said, yeah, we don't custody alternative assets, right? We don't do that. So Schwab, Fidelity, TD, or Schwab TD, which is kind of like saying Morgan Stanley E-Trade, I guess. They're not going to custody your alternative assets that haven't been vetted in some very significant way by their investment committee.
Yeah.
And so I had to go back. I knew it was possible to do this. I know it was legal. It's been legal since ERISA was created in the early 70s. So I had to go figure out how to get this done. And that's how I discovered the self-directed IRA industry.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've been an investor for a long time, and I have been investing for a really long time. And this was one of the single most painful investment experiences I had ever had. So I did what any rational person would do. I made 2 more investments the exact same way. And afterwards, I sort of asked myself, am I the only guy with this problem? Or are there other people like me? And if there are other people like me, how many are there? How big's the opportunity? And what I discovered was that we have almost $30 trillion sitting in retirement accounts, less than 2% invested in alternative assets, for 3 major reasons. One, most people don't know that they can use their retirement savings to invest in alternative assets. 2, it's too complicated. Try finding a custodian who will actually custody the asset for you, much less the process of figuring out how to actually execute an alternative transaction. And you and I were talking about the complexity of that earlier before the show. And then 3rd is price, right? This has been a people and paper burden process since 1970s, and it hasn't changed since then. And so the idea was, you know what, if we can build a platform that will do for alternative IRA investing what TurboTax did for self-filing, well, then maybe there's something there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can take the penetration of retirement dollars into alternatives from 2% to 10 to 20%. And at 10 to 20%, that number looks somewhere like $3 to $6 trillion of investments. And so what started out as this, I have a problem, I want to fix it, kind of traditional entrepreneurial story, evolved into a larger macro understanding of the retirement crisis that America is facing, and wanting to help change that story and that ending. And so the only way we're going to change it, in my opinion, is by getting Americans access to alternatives so that we can improve the overall performance of everyone's portfolio. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying you take 100% of your retirement dollars and stick it in alternatives. I'm saying build a diversified portfolio. And when you add alternatives to a portfolio, you're adding assets that are non-correlated with the public markets. And as a result, over time, you should see a higher return on that portfolio as opposed to let's just say, a more passive approach.
Yeah. Well, that was great. I have like 72 questions off of what you just said. So
awesome. Let's go.
Didn't the SEC like a year or 2 ago begin to authorize more advertising to the little guy versus before where you couldn't do that? And are you guys benefiting from that?
Yeah, so it's a really great point. The SEC passed something called Reg CF, which is regulation crowdfunding. And regulation crowdfunding was sort of a subsection of what was called the Jobs Act, which stood for Jumpstart Our Business Startups, not for Steve Jobs, but Jumpstart Our Business Startups. So the Jobs Act and Title III enabled Reg CF, which opened the door for non-accredited investors, so everyday people, to participate in private equity opportunities that were listed on these SEC FINRA approved platforms. Okay, so some names that some people may recognize, and if not, you're hearing them for the first time. And I encourage you to go check them out. You can also look on our partners page to find some of them. But WeFunder and Republic and Ground Floor are three kind of Reg CF platforms that you can find private equity opportunities, you can find real estate opportunities, you could find securitized token opportunities as a non-accredited investor. And so that was a macro change in the investment environment, together with what I refer to as the fractionalization of securitization, which means you no longer have to be able to buy the whole building to have real estate exposure. Mm-hmm. Instead, you can participate at the $1,000 or $2,500 or $5,000 level. And we're seeing that happen across all sectors, from real estate to collectibles. So now you can buy a share in a portfolio of Michael Jordan, heirs, or whatever they're called. So it's just a different world.
So is Alto IRA, are you guys a custodian? Are you holding the assets?
So we are two things. We are the transaction platform, and we are also the custodian.
So are you recommending investments to people, or is it just a list?
No, we're not making any recommendations. So basically, either you as your own fiduciary or together with your advisor decide that there's an alternative asset that you're interested in investing in, and we essentially facilitate that transaction execution process. So our platform has created workflow. It's brought the workflow into the 21st century. Mm-hmm. It enables deal libraries to live in the cloud, and for issuers or those raising money to invite investors they know to come review that deal documentation and decide whether or not they want to make an investment. So we don't list deals publicly. We simply enable investor and issuer to connect online in an easy fashion.
So it's like a platform, or like a match, it's a platform that matches an investor. No, hold on. If I buy a private deal, I know I can go through you, buy it, and hold it with you in an IRA.
Correct. And actually, the way we built the platform is to have a relationship or an account relationship with both you, the investor, and the issuer, the direct sort of opportunity that you're investing in. And so if I could just finish this one point, which is you come to the platform, you create your Alto IRA account. Maybe you transfer your money from Schwab or Fidelity or TD, wherever it is. You have your new account. There's no tax consequence to doing that.
Yeah.
Through our platform, you issue an invite to the company that you're investing in. The company comes to Alto. They accept your invite. They then create their deal library. And we then serve as the communication hub between the company and you in terms of getting the necessary documentation review done, authorizations, electronic signatures. And then the real benefit to that company is they're not limited to just you as an investor. They can send an email to other investors they have that want to use their retirement savings to invest in their deal. Yeah. And it turns out that those new investors are going to have other deals that they want to invest in. And so on and so forth, it builds.
So you're not necessarily making the recommendations and being like, hey, you need to invest in that or whatever. You're just providing a platform for people to invest privately.
That is exactly correct.
So let me ask you another question that it's along the lines of valuation. So how do you know if you're investing in any of this private stuff that it's actually legit and it's valued right and the actual, like it's all there and it's not just another Madoff? I know that's not what you're doing, but I gotta believe people are asking that because they're making private investments and they're not regulated like securities, like public securities are?
So it's a really good question. And what I would say is,
I've just asked 2 good questions in the first 10 minutes of the show. Notes to everyone listening. This is good.
Maybe like in the next 5 minutes, we can ask the third one too.
Yeah. Okay.
But, so look, when you're talking about private securities, okay, it's a little bit like asking, what is that commercial building or home worth? All right. And it's really about pure economics of supply and demand. Okay. So if a company, if a private company is raising money, and let's say everybody watches Shark Tank or has watched Shark Tank, right?
I use that analogy all the time. I love it.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Right. So if a company's raising money and they say we're raising $1 million, and we're with the $1 million, we are selling 10% of our company. Okay. That means that the company today is valued at $9 million. And once you give me another $1 million, it's valued at 10, right? And so 1/10 is 10%. The question as to whether or not the company is worth that value is really up to the investors. And, you know, early stage investing and venture capital investing is different than private equity investing. With private equity, you ought to have real fundamentals that you can hang your hat on from a due diligence perspective. How many customers are there? How long have they been there? What are the revenues? What's the cash flow? What's the growth rate? And you can apply traditional valuation metrics against that particular later stage company. In the venture capital world, you're making a whole lot of assumptions about what the growth rate is gonna be, about what customer adoption is gonna be, about market size is gonna be, and then you're discounting that back by some factor that you're making up yourself. And so I might say that rather than asking, how do you know if the valuation is good? I would say, how do you know that the management team that you're investing in or with is good, right? And so if we go back to the 30s, and which resulted in, yes, we were coming out of the Depression, and yes, we ended up with the Securities Act of 1933 and 34 because people were being defrauded. I think the bigger question is, how do you make sure that the people you're investing with aren't fraudsters? And what's interesting today is we have so much more information available to us as investors than we ever had. And I really firmly believe that no one takes their retirement savings more seriously than the people looking to retire themselves. And so long as they do the necessary amount of diligence and homework to understand who it is they're investing with and what it is they're investing in, that the rates of fraud, in my opinion, is going to be way lower than even what I think we can expect sometimes in the public markets. When you talk about Enron and WorldCom and companies that are allowed to go public, you know, that's.
Let me add another question to that, because I don't think I asked it right. So I understand how you answer the question about valuation. I get that, but I'm talking about, how do you know? Like, so if I invest in company A and it's private, and I give them $10,000, who's the one that's that's determining what the value is? And is it going on the statement? Are you guys like recording a value on the statement? And are you getting that from the company? And how do you know that that's the right value? I know that it's based on what a buyer would buy it at, but I'm talking about what the client sees.
Okay. So in part, you're asking the IRS question, which is what gets reported to the IRS, and what gets reported to the IRS is what goes on your statement. So now I understand this question, which is yes, a different question. So and I'm going to say it depends. So and it depends on the type of security you're purchasing. Are you purchasing a preferred equity interest in a company? Are you purchasing a loan that's interest bearing? And in the case of the exact example that you're talking about, where I've made this $10,000 investment in a private company, I'm going to carry it at cost until the company has reported an event that justifies a valuation up or down.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
And until the company does that, it's carried at cost.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Got it. I want to switch gears to you.
Okay.
You worked at one company for 8 years, and I think the name was called Current. Was that right?
Oh, you mean Currenex?
Currenex. Okay, yes. You worked there for 8 years?
I did not.
Where did you work for 8 years? I have it in a different bio that you worked at one place. Maybe you were affiliated with them.
Well, Tennessee Community Ventures, which is the venture fund.
Let's see. I always like to ask the people on the show, like, they were at one place for a while. What did they learn there? Okay, no. Yeah, Currenex. Currenex,
I was a co-founder of, but I did not work at Currenex.
It says that you were there for 8 years.
I don't know what says that I was there for 8 years.
Your LinkedIn profile says you were there for 8 years.
Well, it just goes to show you that you can't believe everything you read on the internet.
We can't invest in LinkedIn. By the way, that was just a hypothetical. People don't think I'm saying that.
Now I'm going.
Okay, so let me back up
my profile.
Let me back up my question. You got to this place where you started this company, and you built. It probably took you 10 years to get to this stage in your life to start this business. I don't know if I'm saying 10, who knows what the number is, but there had to have been things that you learned in business and, kind of growing up in the business world. And I'm interested, what got you over the hump to start this business and how you went about doing that from a mindset perspective?
Okay. So which one are we talking about now? Currenex or Alto?
Alto. Like, how did you get to Alto? What were all of the things that you had to do? Some of the failures that you've had that you've learned from, some successes that you've built off of?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to high school. And in high school, I sold frozen. So I grew up in Miami, Florida, and I sold frozen lemonade out of an unair conditioned, bright yellow, like banana yellow van. And it was a really simple business model, which was the more I sold, the more I made. Right. And so every day when I got in the van, I counted out the number of cups with the guy that actually owned the lemonade.
Yeah.
And I owed him for every cup that I took. Okay. And I may get this reversed, but I think I got 60% of every cup that was sold, something like that. Right. And so at the end of the day, I had to come back with hopefully all cash, no cups, or I came back with cash and some number of cups. Right. And so I went from high school to college and I bought the campus newspaper distribution business because I understood that it had the very same model, which was the more papers I sold to my classmates, the more money I made. I had a fixed cost of each paper. The more I sold, the more I made. And from there, I went to Wall Street. I went to Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette, DLJ, still the greatest investment bank ever to exist, and had exposure to finance on a much larger scale and many different business models. But what I found was that, as interesting as that was, what I really wanted to be doing was to be a part of the businesses that were raising the money, not be part of the business that was raising the money for the businesses.
Yeah.
And so I initially left investment banking to start a coffee company in Manhattan. And I opened up a coffee company the same month that Starbucks opened its first store in Manhattan. So they opened up on the Upper West Side, and I opened on the Upper East Side. What I didn't know is that they opened up in the dead center of what was their single largest mail order zip code in the country. I wish I had fucking known that. I would open up on the Upper West Side too. In fact, I lived on the Upper West Side. I was riding my bike across the park at five each morning, to open up the doors of the coffee bar on the Upper East Side.
You went from investment banking to starting a coffee business.
Yeah, fucking crazy, right? Yeah. But I did meet my wife as a result, by the way.
Have you been to the Levain Bakery in the Upper West Side?
I don't know that I have, but it is Levain?
It's something like that. I've heard it's a big one out there. I was there once. It was awesome.
I feel like I've seen it, but I don't know that I've been there.
All right, so it's 5 a.m. You're biking to your shop.
So I'm biking to my shop, and long story short is that I end up closing the coffee bar because I picked the wrong location, and I can't get so you have to remember, people old enough will remember, but the young people won't remember, is that, fancy coffee wasn't a thing in the early 90s in, almost anywhere other than Seattle, maybe. Mm-hmm. Like fancy coffee and Starbucks, that was new. And so it's like, why should I pay you, $2 when I can pay the guy selling the coffee in the Greek blue, we are happy to serve you coffee cup for 95 cents, right? What's the difference? There's no difference, right? And so I picked the wrong location and ultimately closed the coffee bar. And that was the first time I had ever failed in anything.
What'd you learn?
So in retail, there are only three important things in retail: location, location, location. And I got all fucking three of them wrong. So the other thing I learned was how to communicate to my investors and take responsibility for my own failures in this process. So people had invested in me, right? Yeah, they invested in coffee, mm-hmm. and they could see coffee taken off, but they had invested in me, and I lost their money. And I don't think there's any worse feeling than losing somebody else's money when they've invested with you. The other thing is that I could go back and I could pick apart sort of every part, in hindsight's 2020, right? But I could pick apart every one of my decisions as to why I thought that was the right location, because I knew what the three rules of retail were. And I could go back and identify, what, I should have known that crossing over 96th Street, which is where we were, which was, there are not a lot of streets that go both east-west in New York, and we were on the opposite side of a street, 96th Street, which had traffic going both ways, which would keep people from crossing the street. So that would hurt our foot traffic. I was too far north. I actually knew that Starbucks was going to be moving into Manhattan, and I thought I wanted a location that would be somewhat walled off from their growth. And I went too far north. I got a great deal price-wise on the location I got, and I got a great deal because I was too far north and because I was on the opposite side of the street, right? And the thing about retail is that you'll never make up for cheap rent what you're going to lose in revenues as a result of it. And so, there were a number of lessons learned in that process, but the biggest one I would say is that I could dust myself off and stand back up and figure out what was next and do it again.
Do you think a lot of business owners these days are not resilient enough?
Well,
it's a broad question, but I'm just curious based on your experience.
So I think resiliency is, first of all, I love that word is more common today than it used to be. I think people who are in business, I think any business owner who's been in business for more than 2 years has to have some semblance of resiliency. And I say that because it's important to understand that with each additional year that you are in business, you have defied the odds. Yeah. Okay, so there's like a 90% failure rate in year one. And then there's a 90% of the 90% failure rate in year two. And so if you get beyond year two, you're scrapping, you're working hard, you're making changes, you're adapting to the economic outlook and environment, and you're doing what you can to figure it out. And none of it's easy. Everyone who has started an enterprise of any sort, hats off to them. I mean, I really don't care what the sector is, what the service is, what the product is. If you can start, you're way ahead of the game. The hardest thing is to start. The next hardest thing is to survive. And so, I don't know that we're missing resiliency among entrepreneurs in America. What we may be missing is the fire to start in the first place.
Is that what you're teaching the high school kids that you teach about entrepreneurship?
So first of all, thank you for asking that question. The kids that come to the high school entrepreneurship class are a self-selecting group. Mm-hmm. And they're really interested in A, being there, and B, understanding what it takes actually to be an entrepreneur. And the way you start every year is to say, if you're gonna choose entrepreneurship because you wanna make a lot of money, pick another job. Like that, I mean, there are much easier ways to, eventually at least make a good living as opposed to starting your own company. Like that's hard. Yeah. That's really, and it gets to your point of resiliency. And, the other really cool thing is we've had some ideas in the entrepreneurship class that we have now seen actually get funded in the real world. Not that my kids actually went and created these, but we vetted these actual same businesses and business models that they came up with on their own, but didn't go, they're still in high school, right? They're 10th graders, they're 11th graders, 12th graders, One that I find so interesting that I say, actually, I'll give you 3 examples of what, of why we should be optimistic about the future in America, and what kids are thinking about. And so, and two of these are tangentially related. One, we had a young woman say, there's not enough mental health available to high school kids, and it ought to be available online. Okay, and you ought to be able to find your psychologist, sociologist, whatever you want to call it, with your phone, because that's the way kids work. And what we see happening today in healthcare and mental health in specific is that there are companies that are operating essentially through the mobile phone and through an app experience that are connecting patient with psychologist. And the key is not the connection, but the key, actually, it turns out, is simplifying the health insurance filing process, right? And so many people don't get this kind of help because they can't afford it. And they don't understand how to make healthcare that they pay for work for them.
Sure.
And so these companies have figured out how to make that work for them. And what's interesting to me is that, here are these high schoolers and this young woman who actually had this idea, right? Like, she saw it for a segment, her population. But what's interesting is that there are others who have said, you know what, this is actually applicable beyond high school. It's applicable in across demographics. We had another, there was a young man who said, and this is when we were seeing, we're still seeing, violence in high schools, and, whether it be suicides or shootings, whatever you want to say. And this young man said there should be like this version of, it's like, I'll call it the anti-panic room, where you go downstairs into this basement filled with stuff and you get a bat and you just go break as much shit as you want, right? With the idea that you will, at the end of this violent, process, have felt some release so that you don't want to leave and harm yourself or harm somebody else. And then what was funny is, like, almost the next week, I read this article in the New York Times where they have started this, not for individuals, but for spouses and partners, to go down into a basement with bats and other stuff and just break shit. I'm like, okay, that sounds way more dangerous to me. Give two, partners who are potentially angry with one another bats to go down and break stuff. I'm like, okay. But anyway, it was crazy that, this young man has this idea, and it probably wasn't a week later, maybe it was a month later, this, thing pops up in New York City, and the New York Times is covering it. But in any event, some of the best discussions ever.
What I'm learning from what you're telling me, it just reinforces that, my son is 17, and he's a junior, he's a year behind, but he's got good ideas, and they're curious, and they need to believe that they can roll with the idea, and that is viable, and that they can do something with that. So we're just about out of time, but I want to ask you just a little bit about how you spend your time and what you do. So tell me a little bit about, like, your first hour in the morning. Like, what is that first hour like for you? What are you doing with that time?
I'm making coffee, first of all, and then I'm reading certain news sources. So I have certain newsletters that come to me each morning. Most of them are aggregators.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm reading through those. And then the stories that, I kind of want to dig into beyond what the headline is, I'll dig a little deeper And usually I'm doing that because it has some relevance to what we're doing at Alto. And I may get some idea. I love taking ideas from spaces that really aren't relevant to what we do in finance, but it may have a customer-centric or customer service spin that I think ought to be applied to what we do at Alto. And so I'll eventually, once I'm done reading, I'll shoot off via Slack or email to my teammates this ridiculous idea that I just had. And I send a lot of them, and sometimes some of them stick. But the nice thing about our team is that they're going to tell me if they think I'm full of shit. So,
you know what? It sounds like you're back in high school, like these kids you're teaching.
a little bit.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
The other thing I do, by the way, is feed the dogs.
Feed the dogs. Awesome.
Yeah.
So where can people go to learn more about Alto? Is it just altoira.com?
That's it. ALTOIRA.com.
Great. Well, Eric, thank you for coming on. I just have had a great time learning about you, how you think, what you do, what your beliefs are. And everyone listening, go to Alto IRA. This is not an official endorsement because I am a financial advisor. I can't tell people what to invest or what to do. Full disclosure, check it out and learn from Eric. And Eric, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It really was a pleasure. And I really like where you took the conversation. It was really fresh. Thanks for doing it.
Awesome. Have a question? Want to get in touch with us? Need some help and advice with your finances? Just go to coolmoneyshow.com and reach out to us. That's coolmoneyshow.com.
Krane Financial Solutions is an SEC-registered investment advisor. However, such registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training, and no inference to the contrary should be made. A copy of our current written disclosure statement discussing our advisory services and fees is available upon request. Information contained herein is for informational and illustrative purposes only and general in nature. It should not be considered specific financial planning or investment advice, or a recommendation to buy or sell any type of securities or other investment products. No investment decision should be made based solely on any information provided herein. We do not provide legal, accounting, or tax services. We recommend that all investors seek out the services of competent professionals in any of the aforementioned areas. Certain information provided has been obtained from third-party sources that we believe reliable. However, it's not been independently verified and is not guaranteed.